wisdom,
prudentia,
justice,
justitia,
temperance,
temperantia,
courage.
fortitudo.
Applying ancient philosophy to modern life, this is the Sunday Stoic.
This week's episode of the Sunday Stoic podcast is with Michael Cockroft. It's a discussion of Stoicism and Freemasonry. The episode was recorded using Zoom, so it will sound a bit like an old AM radio station, but that's okay. I think it comes through pretty well. And Michael wants to point out that a really good book, if you want to know more, is Freemasonry for Dummies, available on Amazon. And one other thing, we have created a Discord channel, a channel on the website Discord, for those of you who would like to log in. Michael's on there. You can ask him questions. You can comment about the show, etc. There's a link to that Discord channel in the show description. Enjoy the show. Welcome to the Sunday Stoic podcast. This is Steve coming to you from my stoa in rainy Conway, Arkansas. I hope everything is well where you are and your pandemic numbers are going down, because here in Arkansas, they're moving in the wrong direction. This week, we have a guest, and not only a guest, but a patron as well, a great supporter of the show, a very active patron, Michael Cockroft, who is a software analyst from Dayton, Ohio. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Steve.
So how are things in Ohio?
Here in Dayton, the numbers of COVID are also rising. My mother is a kind of a higher risk person, so we're doing our best to isolate. But I see a lot of people out there that are getting real social, so our numbers seem to be climbing as well.
I went to the store. I went to the store yesterday, and I'd say probably about 5% of the people at the store had a mask on.
Yeah, but hey, at least the weather's nice here. It's mid 80s and comfortable at the moment.
Not bad, not bad. So let's just start. We're going to talk today about the similarities and differences between Stoicism and Freemasonry, correct?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
And let's just start with Stoicism. You listen to this podcast for some reason, so apparently you do practice Stoicism. So how did you first get into this philosophy?
Stoicism is it kind of struck a chord with me. I believe I first heard about it on a podcast. I can't pinpoint exactly which one. Probably Art of Manliness podcast with Brett McKay. Fantastic podcast. And I believe I also heard an interview with maybe Tim Ferriss, because I know I heard an early interview with him before I really got into the philosophy. It might have been on, I used to listen to a podcast called College Info Geek. So listening to a couple of podcasts, they started talking about the benefits of Stoicism. And at first I thought it just another, productivity hack or something.
Right.
But yeah, so we still hear about that a lot. But I also started to learn that, hey, there are a lot of good lessons to be learned in Stoicism. And I started listening to this another short podcast called Good Fortune.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember the gentleman's name, Matt something, I think. But it was an excellent podcast. It was very enlightening, and I found out that there were a lot of parallels to Freemasonry. So that really continued to strike that nerve, and or strike that chord, I should say. It really resonated with me, and I knew that I had to dig in deeper. So I listened to some more podcasts, did some reading, read some articles, and then started reading books and chatting with fine folks like yourself.
Oh my.
And yeah, that was, it's probably been, I'd say I'm probably going on maybe 3 years now looking into Stoicism.
Wow. How long have you been involved in Masonry?
15 years.
15.
Actually, it'll be 16 years in November, because I joined Freemasonry in November of 2004.
Wow. So let's start then with a basic definition. what is Freemasonry? I mean, I know a lot of us, you drive through town and you'll see a little building tucked away with some symbols on the front or a sign up, but a lot of us have no idea what's going on in those doors or what it is. What is Freemasonry?
So Freemasonry is the world's oldest and largest fraternal organization. You've got a lot of organizations out there like the Elks, the Moose Lodge, Rotary Club, things like that. Freemasonry is a fraternal organization, as completely read directly from Freemasonry.com. It is the leading fraternal organization in the world. Its origins are lost in the unrecorded history of medieval times, but formally organized in London, England in 1717. That's why it's the oldest fraternal organization. So we've got over 3 million members worldwide, 1.1 of whom are in North America. So over a third of Masons in the world are in the United States and Canada. So tons of lodges. And I was taking this from Freemason.com, which is from the Grand Lodge of Ohio, which is where I am. Free and Accepted Masons of Ohio. As a fraternal organization, Freemasonry unites men of good character who, through different religious, ethnic, and social backgrounds, share a belief in fatherhood of God and brotherhood of man. Okay, so there are some similarities to at least ancient Stoicism there, just in that statement. Exactly. So let's say someone who's listening wants to check out this fraternal organization. Who can join Freemasonry? Typically, in most places, particularly in the United States and England, most places that are affiliated with the United Grand Lodge of England, again, that first Grand Lodge there, it's typically men who are of legal age. Each jurisdiction has its own limits. Some are 18, some are 19, some are 21 years old, who believe in a supreme benevolent creator. There are a few other stipulations, like typically we don't allow men who have had a felony on their record or things like that. We want good men. The purpose of Freemasonry, the motto that we often have is taking good men and making them better. So yeah, it's a men's organization, typically men who have a religious beliefs or beliefs in a connection to a divine being, and who want to make themselves better. So how, if they wanted to join a lodge or find out about joining a lodge, do they just go knock on the door, or what should they do? Well, that's a possibility. You can always knock on the door and say, hey, I'd like to learn more. And that's presuming somebody's at the lodge at that time. Right. But if you run into a Mason, another little catchphrase we have is to be one, ask one. You'll often see it written out in the number 2, letter B, number 1, and it says ask and then the number 1. Basically asking Masons for more information. Because the other requirement to be a Mason is that you have to have the recommendation of 2 brothers in good standing. We Masons refer to each other as brothers. So once you become a Mason, you are now brother this, brother that. I'm Brother Cockroft. There are other titles that we love. Masons love our titles. So that things that you can do throughout the fraternity to add titles. So for instance, I've served as the head of my lodge for a year, so I'm called a past master. The current head of the lodge is called the worshipful master, and that doesn't mean we're worshiping him by any stretch of the imagination. Typically, he doesn't necessarily feel worshipped as overworked, but it means that he is full of worship for that supreme benevolent creator. So to do that, if somebody doesn't know where to knock or who to ask, then there are websites all over the place. And it depends on where you live, but you can often say Grand Lodge of Ohio, for instance, or Grand Lodge of Toronto, or Grand Lodge of wherever you are, your country, your city, or just say Masonic Lodge in whatever city. I work with a lot of people in Bosnia, and Bosnia and the other name of the country that I have difficulty pronouncing, to be honest. Good people, really great people to work with. Let me be honest, but I cannot pronounce it for the life of me. But I was interested in Freemasonry over there, so I Googled that and got information on their Grand Lodge. So if you're interested, it's best to look for Grand Lodge and check to make sure that they are recognized typically by the Grand Lodge of England, United Grand Lodge of England. There are other organizations that are not recognized. They're called clandestine. There was a lot of discussion on there on those things, but you just want to make sure that you're not. There are some people that use the name of Freemasonry that are not recognized, or some groups that use the name of Freemasonry that amount to little more than a pyramid scheme. It's very sad, but they'll basically rope people in and say, "Oh, we're going to give you." I've seen it. I've seen a what is that thing? A TikTok account that literally claims to provide people with fame and money for joining the Masonic Illuminati. Not real. Not real at all.
Too much Dan Brown.
Yeah, well, Dan Brown really actually respects the Freemasons, but he gets into some crazy stories. It's good to keep in mind that his stuff is predominantly fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, there are groups out there. It's best to check out a lodge and ask around and find out the reality of the whether they're recognized and what kind of work they do before you pursue that.
So what is it that the Freemasons do then? So you are you are a Mason. So what does that mean? What does that entail?
So the predominant reason to become a Freemason, there are a number of reasons. The main reason for someone to join a Masonic lodge would be the exact same reason to learn more about and practice Stoicism, and that is to be a better person. Again, that motto, taking good men and making them better. We believe in the fatherhood of God and the brotherhood of mankind. So we want to basically improve ourselves and improve the world. So you can do that through social, by becoming part of a greater community, getting around others and learning from others and committing to that, doing service in that community. For instance, my lodge has a program where we work with some local churches and fill backpacks with foodstuffs, school supplies, things like that for low-income students, things like that. Or we might adopt a few families for Christmas, things like that, stuff to give back to the community and help build a better community.
Great.
And then there's education. One of the aspects of Freemasonry is esotericism. There's a lot of symbolism in Freemasonry, and the esoteric part is kind of it's taking that symbolism and learning how to interpret it into real life action.
Okay.
So basically, learning how to, as the alchemists put it, and I may not be saying this perfectly correct because I am not an alchemist, a practicing alchemist in that way. I've only heard some speak, but as they would say, alchemists supposedly create, take chemicals and such, or they might take lead and turn it into gold. You're basically trying to take yourself as lead, as imperfect, and turn yourself into something golden, or remove the impurities. So there's a great esoteric, there's a lot of interesting esoteric research and discussion. You won't find that in every lodge. You'll find that there are places online you might find that information, or you might find that in certain lodges that like to do that type of thing. That's not everywhere, but it's a really interesting thing to do. One of the reasons that I joined Freemasonry is that I am a fifth generation Freemason. My father was a Freemason. Although he passed away in 1996, I was only 20 years old at the time. So, and I had never really thought of Freemasonry. But when I thought back, he always had a friend everywhere he went. And part of that was he was also a Vietnam vet. So he always had somebody to, meet other vets and stuff and talk to them, but he always seemed to have a friend anywhere he went. He always seemed to meet a buddy. I really think, and I can't ask him, of course, but I think that part of that was the fact that he was a Mason. And I remember seeing he had a few of these little discs that had these funny looking things with points on them and stuff. And now I know those are called the square and compasses. Or some jurisdictions call them compass, some call them compasses, but they're basically tools for drawing the designs of your life, drawing a circle, and that circle is used to draw the designs of your life. But yeah, so I remembered my father was I found my father was a Mason when in my mid-20s when I started to look into it, and I spoke with my grandmother and my aunt, and I found out that not only was he a Mason, well, I knew my grandfather was a Mason. I didn't know this at the time, but he had a Shriner funeral because he was a Shriner. And if you know who the Shriners are, they don't just drive around in funny little cars in the parades. They don't just have these wonderful hospitals for children all around the country. That's not the only thing they do. They're also Freemasons. You have to be a Master Mason before you can become a Shriner. So they are what's called an appendant body. You might hear of other appendant bodies like the Scottish Rite, York Rite, things like that. But the Shriners are probably the most well-known. So my grandfather was a Shriner. And then I found out that not his father, his father-in-law, my grandmother's father was a Mason, and his father was a Mason.
Wow.
So yeah, I've got a lot of it in there. So a lot of people will join because it's a family tradition type thing. And I can honestly say that my membership has it made me feel closer to my father. It's helped me to understand a few things about him.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
So we have to breach this then. There's a lot of stuff out there about Masonry and a lot of negativity that floats up as well from various churches, various websites. And so are the rumors true?
I don't know what rumors you're talking about. I'm just teasing. Of course I know the rumors. Because I had to look into those rumors as well. When I went to join the lodge, I know I have an uncle who said to my mom, "You're not going to let him join that thing." She's like, "He's an adult. What am I going to do?" She also said his father was a Mason. He knows all. I have uncles who are Masons as well. I don't want to make it sound like it was a direct lineage, but
Right.
She said that there's not a concern. So she spoke to that, but I've spoken to a number of people that said, "Oh, it's a cult. It's this. First of all, Freemasonry is not a religion. This is what blows people's minds. When I joined, a friend of mine said, "Oh, that's a really weird religion." It's not a religion. Freemasonry in and of itself does not provide a path to salvation. It does not provide this path to enlightenment. It simply gives you the tools to work on yourself. It provides those tools. It is meant to go along with a man's religious beliefs or spiritual beliefs. So the majority of Masons are Christians, especially in the United States. There are various parts. There are, as it said before, there are men of different religious backgrounds. So we do have Jewish Masons. We have Muslim Masons. We have Hindu Masons, interestingly. The Grand Lodge of England determined that because Hindus, even though they believe in multiple gods, they believe in Brahma as all gods as one aspect of the Brahma, then they therefore can be Masons. So yeah, we've got pagan brothers, we've got deist brothers, and some people hear about deism. It's basically the belief that there was a God. God created this world as a giant, almost like a giant clockwork, and then stepped away and let that world go. Let that world not go, but let that world work.
Sure.
It was designed perfectly, and God let it go, or let it run. So yeah, when I hear that Freemasons worship Satan, that is. Oh, but then we hear, oh, but they don't tell you about that until the 33rd degree. The 33rd degree. So the 33rd degree in the Scottish Rite. Remember, I talked about those appendant bodies. The Scottish Rite is a side body. Okay, it's not the core of Freemasonry. The core of Freemasonry is called, quote unquote, the Blue Lodge. It's the first 3 degrees of Freemasonry. Every other degree is on the side.
Okay.
And the Scottish Rite is goes up to 32 degrees. I am a 32nd degree Mason because I've joined the Scottish Rite. That doesn't mean I'm a higher degree than any other Master Mason around. That just means I've gone and seen these other degrees. The 33rd degree is simply an honorific. That says this man has put a lot of time and effort into things for the Scottish Rite, into organizing things, into helping things, into running charities, into serving the community in the name of the Scottish Rite, that he now is a 33rd degree Mason. And the man who did my wedding, the man who presided over, officiated over my wedding, is a 33rd degree Mason now. And he's somebody want to tell me that the 33rd degree Masons know about the satanic it's ridiculous.
Well, I know.
And then there's the rumor.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry,
go ahead. No, more rumors. Go ahead.
Then there's the rumor about the New World Order or the Illuminati or whatever, the secret control, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And anybody that's ever been on one of our planning committees, like for something like a pancake breakfast or a holiday party, knows that is absolutely ridiculous. Because that's just a no. It's not. It's really the same as any other organizational group. That it hinges on the fact that we have secrets. And we don't have this in the notes, but I'm going to take a moment to talk about why Masons have secrets. Okay. And I'm not going to give away any of those secrets in doing it. But that's the important part about Freemasons. Freemasons have secrets, and they're sworn to secrecy. The reason being is that we do rituals. Those rituals, those degrees that I was talking about, each time you get a degree, you're either going to participate in or you're going to see a ritual. Okay? And we swear to secrecy, not to reveal those rituals. Well, why? Because it's a shared experience. There is nothing nefarious at all going on in them. There is it's basically teaching our symbols and discussing what it is to be a good man. The reason that they are our secrets is, is because we have that shared experience. So, and there's a book called The Initiatic Experience that in which they speak about having those shared experiences and it bringing people together. So when you join the military, you go through basic training, and that in and of itself is a initiation. When you join a college fraternity or college sorority, they have their initiate. Now, some of those get into hazing.
Yeah.
But really, there are a lot of them. You know, we focus on the hazing, but we don't realize that there are so many of them that are good, that are built on bringing out moral character. Not the hazing. You know, there are hazing where people go crazy. There's no hazing in Freemasonry, or there's not supposed to be. Groups have gotten in trouble for getting a little too crazy. That's what we're, that in general, Freemasonry isn't about hazing. It's about the initiatic experience. And it's about bringing people together through that. So those secrets are just us learning how to be better people and bringing each other together in doing so.
Now, I grew up in the Catholic faith. especially in my younger years, and
Mhm.
I don't remember anyone actually saying anything about Masons, but later on I learned that there's at least it used to be you could be excommunicated for becoming a Mason,
Mhm.
and I looked into that before the show a bit, and it said that the Catholics say that Masonry is a naturalistic religion. And one that basically says there are many paths to God when there's really only one path, and therefore it's incompatible. Um, do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly. And I've learned about this as well. The Catholic Church, boy, I wish this is something that I'd like to be able to pull some more details on.
Right,
But
right, right.
basically, they were at one time, Freemasons were considered, um, um, becoming a Freemason was considered an excommunicable offense in the Catholic Church. I don't know. I'm not a Catholic. I can't say specifically. I do know we have Catholic brothers.
Hmm.
One of my best friends in the world is a Catholic brother. And so I don't believe, I can't speak officially for that. Um, but he is I don't believe, I'm fairly certain he hasn't been excommunicated either.
Right.
That's
Well,
that's something
I
you'll
did.
have to confirm on.
I
But
I I,
as
I was just
go
going to
ahead.
say the guy, what's his name, Danny Thomas. He founded St. Jude's Children's Hospital.
Oh, okay. Yes,
He was
yes.
he was Catholic, I believe, and he was also a Shriner. So
Hmm. Hmm.
it has happened, but apparently it's still
Yeah.
frowned upon, at least. Actually,
It is in certain circles. There is a Catholic group that's made to be similar to Freemasons, called the Knights of Columbus.
I've been to many a
I
wedding at a KFC hall. When I was a kid,
I have as well.
I always thought it was the KFC hall, and I thought it had something to do with Kentucky Fried Chicken, but it does not.
Yeah, I mean, I've met a number of them, real nice guys. Um, but it's as far as it being a naturalistic religion or believing that there are many paths to God. The only way I could address that is Freemasonry doesn't tell you what your path to God is. Freemasonry doesn't tell you what you should believe religiously. We in fact, there is a rule. We are very strict that while you are in lodge, while you are in the meeting, we don't discuss politics or religion. Now, many of our lessons are based on biblical stories.
Mhm.
Um, but it's not saying this is how you must believe. It's saying this is our allegory. Okay. This is our symbolism. This is what we're using in our symbolism. So it's not the belief that there's no Freemason that's saying, oh well, you can. Well, I shouldn't say that. Freemasonry as a collective does not make the statement you can follow any of these and you're all right.
Mhm.
Freemasonry says it's between you and God, and as long as you're a good and moral person, then you can come here to learn more and work more towards being a good and moral person. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So let's then get away from the rumors and whatnot, and talk then a little bit more about Stoicism and Freemasonry. Are there overlaps and parallels that you have seen in your 15 years of
Yeah,
Freemasonry?
absolutely. And as I said, that was actually one of the things that drew me to Stoicism, particularly these four little cardinal virtues: courage, wisdom, temperance, and justice. Because in Freemasonry, we tell in the very first degree, we talk about temperance, fortitude, prudence, and justice. Um, those four cardinal virtues, and it at the time I thought Freemasonry must have taken them directly from Stoicism because Stoicism is older. obviously. But realistically, those 4 cardinal virtues were based on the on Greek philosophies, basic in most Greek philosophies.
Yeah.
So they weren't specific to Stoicism.
Right.
But I do know that Thomas Aquinas, the religious scholar, did write about these 4 cardinal virtues. And I know that Thomas Aquinas also, in history, did influence Masonic ritual and Masonic teachings. So another parallel is the porch. One of the things that Freemasons talk about, I'm not going to go too deep into it because we have those secrets,
Right.
but one of the things we do talk about is the porch. Now, in Freemasonry, we're talking about the porch of King Solomon's temple, because we've got this big porch that we've got to go into to learn more from it. Well, in Stoicism, the word stoa itself means the porch. So in both places, we're talking about a porch. And what is a porch but a stepping stone up to a building, to a structure. And so that's a very important place for the beginning of wisdom, the beginning of knowledge. In Freemasonry, we teach a lot of our lessons through what we call the working tools. So the symbol that you were referring to, most likely that you're seeing around town, is what we call the square and compasses. The square it looks like a ruler, but it's at a 90-degree angle. And the compasses are basically 2 points on a little pivot, basically, and that's used to draw circles. The square is to make sure that you can draw perfect 90-degree corners, and the compass is to draw circles perfectly. And so those, in general, again, not going to go too deep into them, but basically they're about drawing the plans of our lives. They're about making sure, when we say square, and when we talk about a square deal, that's literally taken from Freemasonry. When we talk about being on the level, that's literally taken from Freemasonry, because the level is another one of those. We're talking about being fair, being honest, seeing each other as equals. The compasses, we're talking about drawing that circle around ourselves, and that's not to contain, to separate ourselves from others, but to contain our passions, to keep our passions in due bounds. And that is about as stoic as I can think of. To be a Mason, one of the first lessons we're taught is to learn to restrain our passions. I'm still learning that, Steve.
Really?
Still trying to get that one down. There's an old joke in Freemasonry where this young man in his early 20s joined a lodge, and he got his first degree, and then he disappeared. And 40 years later, or 50 years later, he comes back as an old man and says he wants to get a second degree. And they say, well, absolutely, let's move you forward. But why did you wait so long to come back? And he says, well, I had to learn to subdue my passions.
Yeah, that's a bit of a work in progress.
It's a joke, but boy, oh boy, does that hit home.
Yeah.
So yeah, these tools are important lessons for us. They contain important lessons for us. And I feel like these tools really encompass the same types of lessons we learn in Stoicism. They're really mnemonic icons for us to remember what these lessons are.
Gotcha.
So in this sense, Stoicism and Freemasonry really work together hand in hand, because Stoicism allows us to expound upon those and learn more from ancient writers about these things and how things back then happened, and they still apply to modern times. The response to them still applies to modern times. We see the same thing in Freemasonry. And then there's finally cosmopolitanism, the belief that men are equal, everybody, mankind are to be treated equally, to be treated fairly, that we are a citizen of the world. And I've met Masons from all over the world online. It's so interesting that when I'll run into somebody that's a Mason from somewhere else in a completely different circumstance, I play some games online, and I got to talking with a guy, and after he and I were having direct message conversations about various things, and eventually it led to like early founding father politics and such.
Like
and
you do.
that in turn led to, we found out one of them was a Freemason. I said, oh, he's a Freemason, so on and so forth. I said, that's why I've heard of him. And he says, oh, really? Come to find out, this guy's a Freemason. Not only was he a Freemason, this guy who lives in Pittsburgh now is a Mason from here in Dayton, Ohio.
Oh, wow.
So we really find out that as huge of a world as it is, things still bring us back. We are still part of the same human family. We are all part of that brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. So yeah, that's those to me are some of the main points, and there are other little things that
Sure.
really are fascinating that that I really enjoy speaking with, especially Masons who have learned about Stoicism as well. And we start to go, oh, that's where that came from. Absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
Now, what about differences then? If a Stoic is thinking about going this route, what are some things they should be aware of that are different between the two philosophies?
Well, so we've got to, that's a good question. We've got to understand that Freemasonry is not just Stoicism in another package.
Right.
Freemasonry has taken a lot from a lot of different philosophies, and it leans heavily on Judeo-Christian teachings. So one of the big differences I've seen, and I've actually heard in some other podcasts and such, is that Freemasonry really focuses on charities. For instance, Grand Lodge of Ohio gives millions of dollars every year to Special Olympics, Ohio Special Olympics. We have, as I said before, we've got local social services and charities and so on and so forth. It's not that Stoicism doesn't, you and I have had this conversation, that Stoicism doesn't necessarily make that a focal point, make charity a focal point, although there are references to charity.
Right.
As I said, I believe that that justice contains in part of it the giving to charity, or the assisting of those who are in need.
Right.
And that in and of itself is charity. Charity in Freemasonry is considered to be one of the greatest of the virtues.
Okay.
So
yeah, you don't hear it emphasized as deeply. It doesn't come up over and over and over again in
exactly.
Stoicism. It's something you have to look for it to find it in Stoicism.
Exactly. And that kind of ties into the major difference here is that while the Stoics often talk about God, or refer to gods, or refer to Zeus, they're typically talking about nature, the natural world, and living in harmony with that natural world. Whereas Freemasonry focuses on a religion, on your particular beliefs. It focuses on that relationship with God, and your practice of it. Now, again, Freemasonry doesn't tell you how to do that, but it shines particular importance on that. So it's really focusing on saying, hey, you should live through your religious beliefs. This is how you need to become a better person. So yeah, that seems to be a bit different. It's a lot more religiously focused than Stoicism, I believe. And I've seen a number of Stoics who have basically taken the atheistic view,
Mhm.
and that's certainly fine. You can certainly be a Stoic and an atheist, arguably. There are a lot of discussions about that.
Right.
But Stoicism doesn't require you to believe in a separate creator. God can be an allegory.
Mhm.
Whereas as Freemasonry in general requires you to believe in a supreme being.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yep.
So for a good chunk of our Judeo-Christian Stoic listeners, it may be an organization or Muslim, or, as you mentioned, several other religious Masons may be interested, or I should say religious Stoics may be interested in pursuing Masonry if they meet those qualifications. Now,
Agreed.
I wanted to ask you then, we'll go into current events a little bit before we end the podcast this week. There was a very famous, I saw it on the news, a very famous Mason had a statue tore down by the Black Lives Matter protests recently. And I, what are your thoughts on this situation? Could you give us a little background on that and
Sure.
and tell us what you think about that?
So the statue in general was the statue of Albert Pike. So Albert Pike was a Confederate general. He was originally from Connecticut, but then moved down south. He was also an attorney, and he represented multiple Native American tribes before the Supreme Court in the day. As a Confederate general, his duty was to contact the Cherokee Nation and to negotiate deals so that they would fight for the Confederacy. And he did that, but there were some disagreements along the way. I'm not going to get into details because I'll be honest, some of them are a little fuzzy off the top of my head.
Right.
But he ended up leaving the Confederacy. In my opinion, not for the right reasons, but he left the Confederacy. He later on went to author multiple books. The biggest one, which is read by many, many Freemasons, and I do have a couple of different copies on my shelves, something called Morals and Dogma, which discusses a lot of things, especially his views of all the other cultures and such. He was very well trained in cultural situations, although, again, there was a lot of controversial views that he took, most of which, many of which wouldn't fly today.
Right.
The reason that he had a statue in Washington, D.C., was because he was also the head of the Scottish Rite. The Scottish Rite, being that appendant body, he was the head of the Scottish Rite Southern Jurisdiction. Believe it or not, Washington, D.C. is considered part of the Southern Jurisdiction. Northern jurisdictions a little more north and west. So even here in Ohio, I'm part of the no, I might be part of the Northern jurisdiction. That's what I know. I don't remember. But he did a lot of writing. He had led the Scottish Rite, and so the Scottish Rite back in, I want to say in the 70s or 80s, donated this statue of Albert Pike. He's not in Confederate uniform; he's just in a suit, to Washington, D.C., and D.C. put it up in this park. Well, he was a Confederate general, so of course, his name came up. There were also rumors that he was in the KKK. Those rumors, I have not seen any substantial evidence to confirm that.
Right.
But he certainly was a Confederate general. Let's be honest, he was pro-slavery at the time.
Sure.
And that I can understand where people were very upset. My concern is not so much that they took the statue down. The Scottish Rite, the statue is owned by the city. So the Scottish Rite up there said that, hey, if the city wanted to take it down, or the city, if DC, if the district wanted to take it down, they would support that. If they wanted to move it back to the House of the Temple, which is the main headquarters of the Scottish Rite, they'd support that. DC never did. Their local government never made an action on it, and so it was taken down. There's a lot of outcry from Freemasons on that. And my thought is, hey, this is an opportunity. This is Epictetus's metaphorical favorite cup, because we have something that is it has become a symbol in our fraternity that is somewhat problematic, but it's become a symbol, and it's become, many Masons, regardless of color or ethnicity, so on and so forth, have read Morals and Dogma, and there's a lot of wisdom in there. Some things that are problematic, but there's a lot of wisdom in there as well. And so people were very upset. And my thought is, hey, this is an item. This is an object. It can probably be restored. It can probably be put up in the House of the Temple or in a proper place where his full history can be explained. I don't see a need to be upset. And so I've said this to other Masons, hey, this is an opportunity for us. This is an opportunity for us to stand behind the brothers of color as community leaders, to bring us together, to have Freemasonry become a driving force in unifying our country rather than dividing it. And we can be upset and call people names and divide ourselves, or we can use these working tools to cement that to spread the cement of brotherly love and try and bring us together. So I really think that if Freemasons took a more Stoic view, myself included, because I'm still working on those passions, that my compass is probably still spread a little too wide. I get excited about it. But I think that we could help bring things together if we use our tools wisely and if we draw on our tracing board properly. That, I think, could be the major benefit for Freemasonry. But if we are so locked in our own ways and not willing to spread that hand, one of the big secrets in Freemasonry is the secret handshake. Ooh, the secret handshake. The biggest secret about that handshake, there's secret ways of doing every one of the degrees, all the side degrees, everything seems to have their own secret handshake. The biggest thing about that handshake is the contact and the reaching out. So we need to stop worrying about the details of that secret handshake and make the handshake itself. And I think Freemasonry could be a tool to do that if we just focus on that. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. But within Masonry itself, could you just touch on, before we go, there's the Prince Hall lodges, and then there, I don't know, then there's just the Free and Accepted Mason lodges. What is the story there?
So, okay, so I hate to call it mainstream Freemasonry, but there, until I get a better way of describing it, there was, back in the day, because everything was socially segregated. Mm-hmm. There was the black Freemasons and there were the white Freemasons. The Prince Hall lodges go back to a group in New England, a group of black soldiers who were initiated by a lodge from England, I believe.
Okay.
And this was before the Civil War, I believe. I can't remember the specific dates. Really, I wish we had a great historian on here to give us the history. They've got a very long history that stretches back from before many Grand Lodges were founded. So that became the Prince Hall. One of them, their first worshipful master, his name was Prince Hall, literally Prince Hall. And that's why their tradition became the Prince Hall Freemasons.
I see. Okay.
They've become a wonderful, wonderful cornerstone of the Black community. And I've seen, I'll be honest, I haven't had the opportunity to visit the lodge, even though our grand lodges have mutual communication and mutual recognition, meaning I just haven't actually visited one of their lodges. Almost intimidated to, because they do things with such precision. So we've had these two groups, what we call mainstream Masonry, which is predominantly white Christian. It's starting to get more blended, thankfully. There's starting to become more diversity.
Mm-hmm.
And in Prince Hall Freemasonry, they have Caucasian, Asian, brothers of other ethnicities and backgrounds as well. We're starting to get more diversity in both groups. And the more importantly, I think, is mutual recognition. Some people are saying we should combine, but there's such history between both of them that I think we can definitely learn from each other and still maintain our cultural heritages. It's inside of Freemasonry. I wouldn't be opposed to combining if everybody wanted to, but I also see the benefit of having two distinct groups doing things that we can both go and learn from each other as well. Another thing I want to point out is that most states have their own individual Grand Lodge. There's no Grand Lodge in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
There is a Council of Grand Masters of the United States, and that council is basically the Grand Master of each state. He's the presiding officer over the entire state, or that entire jurisdiction at that time. So all the states plus DC each have their own Grand Lodges. I think there's one state that's actually under another state's Grand Lodge, but I can't remember which, like Alaska or Hawaii or something like that. And they're all independent jurisdictions. So most of our states have mutual recognition with Prince Hall Freemasons, and vice versa, of course. In fact,
except in the South where I live, I've noticed, but
there are some that do not, that you do not yet. And what I find encouraging is that I see, at least online, I do see that there are plenty of brothers who say, hey, we're working on it. We're trying to get that. There's a lot of concerns there.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, Freemasonry is still a little bit behind the board, still a little bit behind things, but it's kind of working through things in its own way. And I'm hopeful for the future. There's a lot of things that I'm hopeful for the future there. So I'm not going to go into a lot of details, but there are other situations which may be glaringly obvious, but I'm not going to speak on them at the moment. But I feel like in working through these, that these people who want to be better leaders, better in the community, better men, can step up and support each other. And we've got these wonderful Grand Lodge. I was going to say, the Grand Masters of the Free and Accepted Masons of Washington, D.C., and the Prince Hall Freemasons of Washington, D.C., issued a joint statement regarding the statue of Albert Pike and the Black Lives Matter protests. And I'm not going to even try and summarize it here, but it is so beautifully worded.
Well, if you if it's publicly available, if I can include a link to it in the show description.
Yeah, we'll look that up and I will get it to you, because it is so wonderful. And that's something that shows what happens when we stand together. So we'll get that link so you can add it to the show notes and share it with people, so that we can see, what's better, how we can work together to build a better nation.
Well, great. Well, Michael, is there anything else you'd like to add before we close down the show for the day?
I think we've covered most things. I'm sure people are going to have questions, and if y'all have questions, can they add them to the Sunday Stoic site, or go on to maybe the Discord chat, which I'm a member of. I'm actually an administrator on there.
We should create a public room for that and advertise that for members of the public that want to chat with you.
Okay, so we could call it. Doesn't have to be specific to Freemasonry.
No,
but we could call it episode chat.
Episode chat for the public, and we'll put a link to that in the show description as well.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks for supporting the show too as a patron. I really appreciate your help, and you always show up for book discussions and things. And so that's been great, and thanks for this interesting discussion tonight.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And keep up the good work.
Thanks, Michael. Carpe diem.
Carpe diem.
Thank you for listening to The Sunday Stoic. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review The Sunday Stoic on iTunes. Become a member of the Sunday Stoic team, earn rewards, and be an integral part of the show by becoming a patron at www.patreon.com/SundayStoic. Contact the show by emailing sundaystoic@gmail.com. To find out more, visit www.sundaystoicpodcast.com. And as Steve always says, Carpe diem.